Good morning everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the results of the Japanese CBT2, mainly because the results are in, as well as a lot of feedback, as well as the direction on where the developers want to bring New Genesis. And I feel like it's super duper important and it's super duper interesting to look over all this information because it's pretty much determining the future of New Genesis, as well as a better understanding of the JP player base, which is vastly different from the global player base. But before we jump into all of that, if you're new to the channel, I upload PSO2 content daily. So if you do play this game, I'd really appreciate a subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin the video. But first things first, I would like to thank Bob for, as always, updating bump.org, as well as Kenneth over here for translating all of the information into English. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. So first of all, I want to show off the class level ratio. So only 9% of the players were able to get to max level or level 15. I think out of all the content creators that got access to the JP server, I would say maybe 90% of us actually got to level 15. I think most of us did actually. It's kind of crazy. So it's kind of surprising to me that only 9% of the players reached level 15. But then again, it was very grindy because after level 10, there were no more client orders to help us accelerate the EXP gain. So basically from level 10 to level 15, that was just pure grinding. It would take around I want to say around an hour per level, maybe 2 hours per level near the end. Like 14 to 15 definitely takes a little bit of time. So it could be the fact that people just don't like grinding or they're not used to grinding. So that's probably why they didn't hit max level, especially since CBT was only 3 days. So it was a little bit short. 41% of the players surpassed level 10. This is not surprising at all because you simply just completed like the tutorial and you're like level 9 already. You're really close to level 10. But this is what surprised me. 50% of the players were under level 10. So that means 50% of the players did not even finish like the main tutorials and the main client orders. There were a few bugs. There was one specific client order where it told you to go kill this specific mob, but the quest indicator was actually bringing you to the wrong area. So that could have contributed to why people didn't get past level 10, simply because the quest was a little bit janky and you had to read the text and like find that specific mob instead of just following the quest marker. So that could have contributed a little bit to this number. But this is still very surprising to me that 50% of the players did not get to level 10. So when we get the global CBT, I do hope that we do get numbers like this again, because I do want to compare like the JP players versus the global players. In my personal opinion, I think global players, like I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to surpass level 10, and like the level 15 thing, I'm expecting like a 15% or even like a 20% of the population to get to level 15, simply because I think global players are really good at short-term goals and playing in like short bursts. So like a 3-day beta is probably going to skew the numbers a little bit because a lot of people are probably going to try to play the entire duration of like the 49 hours. I personally am not going to do that, but I will get to level 15. Next up is the battle power. Battle power is something that I am like 90% sure that a lot of the global players are going to get over 1050 battle power. The reason I say this is because there's an actual reward on the global server, on the global side. If you get over 1050 battle power, you actually get a bunch of rewards. And so there's a lot of incentive for people to try to hit this goal. However, when we played on the JP server, I do not think there was any reward for hitting this this amount of battle power, which is why everything is a lot more skewed. But you can see over here that 48% were under 950, 26% were over 950, and 26% did get over 1050 battle power. So this obviously goes hand in hand with the leveling. You know, if you're not over level 10, your battle power is probably not going to go over 950 unless you got really lucky and you got like some 3-star rarity weapons or some units, stuff like that. But this is very understandable since we know that the class level ratio over here. Next up is the class popularity. So we can see over here that Hunter by far is the most popular class. Then it was the Gunner, then Fighter, then Ranger, Force, and then Techer. So Yeah, I kind of expected this. I personally played a lot of Hunter, I played Gunner subclass, but I think this time in the global version, I'm going to do Gunner main class, Hunter subclass, simply because I like the Gunner. The Gunner playstyle just feels very satisfying, and the mid-range thing feels really good. I originally started playing a Ranger on the JP CBT2, but I just couldn't really get into the playstyle. It could be simply because we didn't have that many photon arts, but I simply wasn't feeling the Ranger. It just didn't feel good in my hands. The Gunner felt very smooth, very nice. The Hunter definitely felt very, very satisfying to play as well. So that's why I stuck with these two classes. I never tried the Techer or the Force or the Fighter. These three classes I just never tried, simply because we only had 3 days, and it's simply just not enough time to play every class and get a good feel of it. Okay, next up are the statistics of days played. So you can see 23% of the player base only played for 1 day, 36% played for 2 days, and 41% played all 3 days. So I think most of us on the global server, I'm expecting like 50% or more to play all 3 days. However, that is just a hunch on my half. I don't actually know the numbers. We're gonna have to see after the global CBT. Next up is the character creation, and so it's basically split up into 5 different categories. So the orange, or the most right side, means very good. You know, this gold means good, gray means average, light blue means bad, and dark blue means very bad. So for the character model, I think most people were pretty happy. You know, it's like average, good, and very good is the majority of it, which is very, very good. We've got character creation freedom, also very high satisfaction, and character creator usability, also pretty high satisfaction. So that is pretty good. As for the in-game interface, or the UI, basically main menu usability, you know, it's alright. Most people think it's average because, to be honest, it's very, very basic. It's basically just, you know, click enter to start, and then you select your ship. It's very similar to current PSO2. Nothing's really changed on the usability on the main menu. The option menu usability is also pretty average. It was a little bit complicated. I think something that most people, if not all people I know, turned off motion blur immediately. So I feel like motion blur should be off by default, because at least for myself, I can't play the game with motion blur. I get very, very sick if I see the game in motion blur. It messes up my eyes, so I always turn it off. And that could be one of the main reasons. And like, the menus were a little bit complicated to go through, but then again, everything was in Japanese, so it simply could be just me not understanding the language. Next up is the minimap comprehension. This, actually, a lot of people are very dissatisfied about it. I personally am in the same group. I'm in the bad group, mainly because I didn't understand the minimap. Maybe I'm just dumb, but I felt like the minimap was very, very convoluted, very, very confusing. It wasn't as simple to understand as base PSO2, so I feel like they should probably cross-reference with base PSO2 and move towards that direction more. Next up is the task guide comprehension. Most people voted average. I personally voted bad again, because I got really, really annoyed where one of the quest waypoints were like bringing me to like the wrong area. And the really weird thing about the waypoints is you have to walk like their specific path to get to a specific area. So in my case, there was one area where you could just teleport to a Ryuka device, but if you teleported there, it would break the task guide, and it wouldn't tell you where the mob is. So you basically had to follow, and you had to run towards that area even though you've unlocked the Ryuka device. And that was just very annoying. You know, it just really impeded in my enjoyment, because I wanted to just teleport there, kill the mob, teleport back, hand in the quest. But because of how the task guide was set up, I had to walk there and then find the mob. And even when I did find the mob, it was like the wrong mob. So I do chalk this up to simply like a bug, but it definitely was a little bit annoying, and I didn't like the task guide at all. Next up is the in-game graphics. The open field graphics, I was in the very good camp. It was beautiful, super duper nice. I loved it. I really like the graphics. The graphics is very, very nice. It's a huge upgrade compared to a base PSO2, and I feel like because of that, it's going to bring in a lot of new players, because the number one reason a lot of my friends and a lot of my viewers don't want to play PSO2 is simply because the game looks ugly. The graphics isn't amazing, And to be fair, you know, they have a valid point. The graphics don't look very amazing on base PSO2. So I'm very happy to report that in New Genesis, everything looks beautiful, freaking gorgeous. And even better, the performance does not take a hit at all. I'm able to play everything on medium graphics. So on base PSO2, I play everything on max graphics, but on New Genesis, I bump it down to medium graphics, and I'm still able to play everything perfectly fine. Next up is the enemy graphics effects. So this is just the effects that the enemies have, like all the different attack animations, as well as like their projectiles, and like the Bujin has like the smoke effect and stuff. And they're really pretty, but they do need to work on optimization. I put good. For me, I voted good over here, mainly because there were some optimization issues. So when I was playing Hunter and I'm like up in the enemy's face, when for example the Bujin does his like cloud effect, it looks really pretty, but my frames were chugging. I would drop from like 60 frames down to like 40, 30 frames for that specific attack, and once that animation ended, I would be back at 60 again. So I feel like this is just optimization, and they will probably fix this before the final product, so I'm not too worried about it. Next up is the class evaluation. So basically for every class, they look at their photon arts, their class skills, weapon action, and usability. So for the Hunter, this is a class that I played most of the time, and I agree with this chart over here. Most of it is pretty good, pretty average to good. You know, photon arts felt really nice. I was very happy with the photon arts. I just hope, you know, we get more, because max level was only 15 in the closed beta, so we didn't have access to a lot of our big skills, obviously. Our class skills were pretty basic, nothing really crazy around there. Our weapon action was really nice. I actually really liked the counter. It felt really good. I really enjoyed it. The usability definitely was very good for me. It's a very easy class to pick up and to learn, because you have a lot of HP, you're pretty tanky, you're melee, and you deal quite a decent amount of damage. And yeah, it's really good. I really enjoyed it. As for fighter, I never played the fighter, so I don't have a say over here. But from the podcast I had with Chrono Catastrophe, which did main fighter during the beta test, he was very happy with the class. So he would put all his votes at around good to very good, around in between there. And I think most of the players agree as well. Next up is the Ranger. So the two people that I know that played Ranger during the CBT is Cakes as well as GM Custom. They both seem to like the class. However, there were a couple nuances which needed a little bit of fine tuning. So for example, like the weak bullet was pretty interesting on now that you don't load your gun with 6 weak bullets. You kind of just push the button and you'll shoot a weak bullet, which is pretty cool. But the thing about the Ranger, which I couldn't wrap my head around, was the distance. Because you need to stand a specific distance to gain the maximum amount of damage. If you stood too close or too far, you would deal less damage. So you really needed to stand in that sweet spot. And as a non-Ranger player, like I've never played Ranger in base PSO2, that to me was very difficult to wrap my head around, because there was no indicator telling me that, oh, you need to stand a bit closer or stand a bit further. So there was a lot of times where I was just kind of second guessing myself and just kind of experimenting and losing a lot of damage because of that. But for experienced players like Cammy, he figured those things out pretty easily. And when we were doing our urgent quest, he was doing weak bullet and doing all of his regular DPS rotation pretty easily. As for GM Custom, he never thought about any of these things. He just played naturally. And so I guess the Ranger is in a pretty good spot. Maybe it's just me because I don't play the Ranger that much, so it could be just a me thing, but I do hope that they put an indicator to let us know if we need to stand closer or further, just to make the player usability a little bit better. Next up is the Gunner. I am actually very happy with the Gunner. The Photon Arts, class skill, weapon action, usability to me was all very good. I really enjoyed the Gunner. It felt nice, it felt good, movement was good. There was only one thing that I didn't like about the Photon Arts, and that was when you were casting a Starfire Squall, you were locked in that animation and you couldn't animation cancel, which sometimes caused me to take unnecessary hits, which was a little bit annoying. However, the JP devs have noted that down, and they said that they are going to be working on that. As for the Force and the Techer, unfortunately I never played any of them, so I really can't give any feedback on these two classes. Next up is the Exploration section and the Battle section. So in this, the chart is a little bit different. So the gray colored one means just right. If it's orange, it means there's too many enemies or it's too much. If it's dark blue, then it means it's too little. So enemy frequency, or the amount of enemies in the exploration section and the battle section, most of the people think it's just right or a little bit too little. I personally am in the too little group. In the battle section, which is an 8-man area, I personally think it's just right. But in the exploration section, which is the 32-man area, I definitely think there's too little. I would love to see a lot more mobs in the 32-man area, but for the 8-man area, it's perfect. It is really perfect, especially when you get a PSE burst. There's so many enemies in that very tightly concentrated area. It's very, very nice. As for gathering material and item container frequency, a lot of people think it's too little. I personally am in the same camp. I feel like collecting these materials, I had to go out of my way and collect for 3 hours to get all the mats that I needed to break through my weapons, to upgrade my weapons, to test everything, to make a lot of the videos that I did on the channel. And that really sucked because I know gathering isn't for everyone. It kind of sucks for a lot of people, you know. Not everyone enjoys running from A to B just to hit a rock, right? It's kind of boring. And so I totally understand why people didn't like this. I think they should make it a little bit more fluid with the exploration because the world is beautiful, right? So they really should try to implement it maybe with some dynamic quests or something where you can get these materials while killing mobs or while doing protecting payload, or just put some more dynamic quests which will naturally give you materials instead of having to specifically go out of the way to collect these mats. I feel like it would be a little bit better. Next up is the map design, for example, the terrain, etc. Most people think it's just right to many. I personally think it's alright. The maps are really, really nice. They need to have a lot of stuff in the background so the world looks alive and stuff. I personally really enjoyed it, and the best thing was it didn't really take a performance hit on my PC. My PC is not exactly the best, but it was still able to run everything and the world still looked really, really beautiful. So I'm pretty happy with the map design. Maybe a little bit less verticality in specific areas or more accessibility to higher places. That would be my only complaint, because some places required you to climb a lot of mountaintops, and sometimes it was a little bit difficult. At least for me, I'm just not very good at parkouring and those platform games. So it could be just a me thing again. Next is the tower, cocoons, and trials. So the ease of finding a tower / cocoon, average to good. I think it was alright. It was pretty easy. The cocoons are these really big bunkers. It's kind of hard to miss them. You're running around, the scenery is nice and green, and then boom, you suddenly see a big bunker in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of hard to miss that. So my vote is in good. Obviously, if they want to bump it up to very good, maybe just put an indicator, make it even easier to find so people can just kind of walk up to it. Just make our lives a bit easier. As for the tower, definitely very good. It's very hard to miss the tower. The tower is legitimately a gigantic tower. You can see it from a distance. It's very difficult to miss, alright. Next up is the strategy and enjoyment of the tower or cocoon. I'm in the average, it is kind of boring. It looked boring. It was it was just very average, right? It wasn't nothing very interesting. I do hope that they could spice things up a bit, make the inside of the cocoon look a little bit more interesting. Just having that VR look was kind of boring and plain and bland. As for the difficulty, again, was just right. The bosses weren't too difficult, the mobs weren't too difficult. They're teaching you mechanics, so it shouldn't be difficult. They want it to be average so that you can practice. The ease of understanding trials, it's average. It wasn't too difficult to understand, but then again, everything was in Japanese, so I think it's simply just a language barrier, which is why I'm kind of hesitant to put it on the good side. I'm sure if everything was in English, it would probably be good for me. Next up is the emergency quest or the urgent quest on the global servers. Matchmaking was absolutely, not good. I'm gonna put it in the bad section because we had so many issues with matchmaking. there were a lot of bugs or a lot of issues, blah blah blah. I was not happy with matchmaking. Most of the time I ended up just playing solo because I just didn't want to deal with matchmaking, and you know, it was a nightmare, so I didn't like it. As for the difficulty of the urgent quest, definitely just right. It felt really epic. There were times where I did clench my butt quite a bit because it's intense. It's really intense, but it's really fun, and yeah, I think the difficulty is just right. Not too difficult, not too easy, just right. Now, new additions in New Genesis, the feeling of Photon Glide, definitely good. I really enjoyed being able to glide around the place. However, Photon Dash was average. I needed the Photon Dash to be a lot faster. I was very annoyed on how slow I moved in Photon Dash. Yeah, because the size of the map is very big now, so being able to run around a lot faster is kind of essential. I felt really slow simply because the map was just so much bigger than what we're used to. So even though the movement speed felt similar to base PSO2, like if I was spamming Morning Mist Reaver versus Photon Dash, I feel like it's probably around the same speed. But the only thing that I didn't like was, you know, the map is like 5 times, 10 times, 20 times bigger. So you have to dash for a pretty long time. There were moments where I was just running for like 30 seconds straight before I could get to somewhere, which I felt really you know, it didn't feel good. I would like the dash to be a little bit faster so we can get from place to place a little bit quicker. Next up is the feeling of the multi-weapon system. It's alright. I like the idea of having the multi-weapon system and switching weapons on the fly, but we're so used to base PSO2 where I literally just use my mouse wheel, like mouse wheel up, mouse wheel down, and I can switch weapon palette, that I don't really see the use case of multi-weapon system yet. Obviously this may change later down the line when we hit like mid-game, end-game stuff, because in the early game, multi-weapon system is kind of a waste of money, waste of materials. It didn't really make much sense to use the multi-weapon system in the closed beta other than just to get more information and get a feel for it. But I do see the potential in the multi-weapon system, so I put my vote in average. The mag sonar comprehension. This was very interesting. I feel like they could make it a little bit more obvious, but when you're close to something interesting, your mag will suddenly like do all these weird emotes and like tell you, hey, there's something in this direction, and it will kind of hint you to go towards a specific direction. I feel like they should make it a little bit more obvious, a little bit more they need more indicators to let you know that, hey, your mag is acting up. It's telling you that something's interesting over there. So my vote goes between average and bad. It's somewhere in between here because I do feel like they need to make it a little bit more pronounced. All right. Communication features, average, you know, nothing's really special about there. All I did was spam stamps. It's basically animated symbol arts, which I just love because I just freaking love symbol arts in base PSO2. So making them animated makes it even better. Now this is the general evaluation. 75% of the players are super excited for New Genesis. 24% of the players are willing to try the game if they improve. However, there is 1% of the player base which is like, no, we don't like New Genesis. So I think the numbers are alright, you know, it's basically 99% of the players want to play PSO2, which I am pretty happy about because I think New Genesis is going to be a smash hit. The only thing I'm worried about for New Genesis is its release. I do not want the New Genesis release to be just like PSO2 Global. When the global version of PSO2 first came out, a lot of people wanted to play, but because the release was so janky and so messy and so buggy, you know, it really turned off a lot of people. Especially nowadays, since we've got so many different games to choose from, the first impression is very important. And I feel like the launch or the release of a game has to be done flawlessly, has to be done without any bugs, so that people can get the most enjoyment out of it. Because if your launch of the game is buggy, most people aren't going to give you a second chance to try the game again. So I really hope that New Genesis, that Sega, really takes the time to iron out all the bugs, make sure that the game is perfect on release, so that everyone can enjoy this beautiful game the moment it comes out. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye!
What can I say except you're welcome for the heals, the boosts,